happening?
Hi everyone, and welcome to Wildlife Wednesday. My name is Tyler Greenlee.
And I'm Tenley Thompson, General Manager of Jackson Hole Eco-Tour Adventure.
There you go.
No, sorry. Tenley Thompson, our General Manager, usually hosts this, but you have a guest appearance from me. My name's Bo Weldon. I am another guide here with Jackson Hole Eco-Tour Adventures. Very honored to be here, Tyler.
Yeah, we've had a couple of changes that you might notice this month. We have a new co-host, and we have a new location. We are actually broadcasting from the Eco-Tours office today, so kind of exciting. Well, to start off for today's broadcast, we're going to go and catch up with some wolves and bears in Yellowstone and Grand Teton. Hi everyone, this is Tyler Greenlee here to give you your monthly wolf and bear update from Jackson Hole, Wyoming. August is a time when we begin to do our late summer multi-days up in Yellowstone National Park, and it's a great time to come and see wolves. This is a time of year where wolves are moving their pups to rendezvous sites. And because of that, because the pups are more mature, they're becoming a lot more mobile. And this allows the pack to wander a lot more through their territory in search of bison carcasses. And this time of year is the peak of the bison rut, and the wolves take full advantage when bull bison fight one another. And let's say if one of those bison gets injured and maybe succumbs and dies to those injuries, the wolves are always there ready to scavenge from those carcasses. However, pups at this age are still way too young to participate in any sort of hunts and typically stay at their rendezvous sites. They're not quite at the point yet where they're heading off with the adults to look for bison. The pack that we've been seeing the most during our most recent multi-days has been the Junction Butte pack. Currently, they only have one surviving pup, which is really interesting because last year they had 18 at this time. And so interesting to see how the fortunes of wolf packs change from year to year. And this could be related to disease. It could also be related to food competition. A lot of those now yearling wolf pups from last year are going to be competing with the adults for food. And so the adults might not be bringing back as much food to the den for those pups. One of the carnivores that we see besides wolves during this time of year are black bears. And that's because they're starting to come down out of the higher elevations to feed on berries. And so along the roads, be sure to watch out for black bears. We did have a black bear get hit in Grand Teton National Park about a week ago. And there's quite a lot of worry about whether or not it was 399's cub. Here's 399 here. We were able to see her a couple times this month. Fortunately, her cub is still safe, but super sad about that black bear cub getting hit by a car. So drive slowly if you come and visit Yellowstone and Grand Teton National Park. But hopefully we continue to see more wolves and grizzlies and black bears as the month continues. Well, pretty awesome to see those wolves and bears in the ecosystem. Wolves are definitely one of those animals that can be pretty difficult to see on tour sometimes.
Yeah.
You have to really look for them. Also interesting to see how the fortunes of wolf packs change over time. You know, the Junction Butte pack, I would say, I don't know if you agree, Bo, is like one of the most successful wolf packs in Yellowstone.
Yes.
With huge numbers of wolves.
And their alpha female is the most reproductive in the history of the park, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, alpha female 907F is currently the most reproductively successful female in the history of Yellowstone, which is crazy. And she's, I believe, 10 years old now.
Yeah.
Which is crazy. And this spring they came out with two pups, which was surprisingly low. They now are down to one pup. And to give you some context, last year they had 18.
So many.
Which is pretty crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, now we're going to move on to something that's a little more historical than the wolves in Yellowstone. Wolves have been around since 1995, but we're going to go back all the way to the early 1900s and look at the Old Faithful Inn with Laura and Kirk.
Hey, this is Laura. Welcome to the beautiful and historic Old Faithful Inn here up in Yellowstone National Park. The architect of the Old Faithful Inn was a young man named Robert Reamer. Reamer was originally from a small town in Ohio. Reamer left home at the very young age of 13 to start a new life in sunny San Diego, California, where he met some very important people. He met Charles Mellon, who was the president of the Northern Pacific Railroad Company, who gave Reamer the job working in Yellowstone National Park to construct the Old Faithful Inn and a new train depot up in Gardner, Montana. There has never been a railroad line that entered Yellowstone National Park, not back then and not nowadays. The Northern Pacific Railroad Company wanted to sell more train tickets and marketed the area as a wonderland, persuaded people to come see it, but that meant having infrastructure once the guests arrived. They built hotels within the national park, as well as stagecoach roads, so that guests could get off the rail and onto a stagecoach and go bumping down the dusty trail from hotel to hotel. Back then, a ticket price was just $50 and included all food, lodging, accommodations, and travel for 5.5 days. Reamer was not necessarily famous at the time for his prior work. He was only 29 years old when he first constructed the Old Faithful Inn. So I think he had some experience, but not a ton in other places at that point. But he was in the right place at the right time and willing to head out to Yellowstone, a very cold, snowy place, over the winter of 1903 into 1904, when the Old Faithful Inn first opened for business. Come up the stairs with me, down the red carpet, and through the big red doors of the inn. Back in the old days, visitors would have found the doors closed for safety and would have pulled down on a rope outside to ring the doorbell. The doorbell is on the interior of the door and made out of cast iron, which would ding and alert the guards to let the visitors in. His idea was to bring the outdoors in and built the Old Faithful Inn out of lodgepole pine. The height of a mature lodgepole pine forest is about 76 feet. So he made the top of the building, pointed top of the old house, the oldest section of the hotel, at the exact height of the lodgepole pine forest. Kind of like a big fort. And at the top of the fort is a super neat feature called the crow's nest. The crow's nest is my favorite part of the inn because it reminds me of a treehouse. Since Reamer was very young at the time of designing his building and perhaps missed out on part of his childhood, leaving home so early, he wanted to put a little treehouse at the top, the peak of the hotel. Reamer wanted the style of his hotel to be rustic, and noticed that when he was spending time in the forest, that nature is not perfect. So on the interior of the building, there are asymmetrical windows on the side walls of the hotel to allow light to filter in naturally. Kind of like how light filters down through the limbs of the trees in the forest. He also designed the exterior of the building to not quite match up. There are 2 dormer windows on the right side and 3 on the left side because nature's not perfect. But that was done on purpose. It might look like a mistake to some people, but I think Reamer meant to do that. He wanted to make it feel like you were inside a lodgepole pine forest, but have modern convenience of the indoors. The original hotel opened with light fixtures and indoor plumbing back in June of 1904. Which to me is quite impressive, being that the Old Faithful Inn is just so remote. Inside the Old Faithful Inn, another neat feature is the rhyolite chimney. Rhyolite was local stone brought in from a nearby quarry, which weighed about 500 tons. In 1959, there was a massive earthquake in the area with the epicenter very, very close to Old Faithful. And the top part of the rhyolite chimney, which was very heavy, spun or twisted and toppled over onto the hotel dining room. But luckily, that earthquake happened at almost midnight, so there was no one eating supper in the hotel at the time. But many things have tried to destroy the Old Faithful Inn. Of course, that earthquake in 1959 and the Great Fires of 1988. One addition to the Old Faithful Inn in 1987 were sprinklers. There was a new fire code in effect, and they installed sprinklers so that if there was a fire in the hotel or outside it, they could wet the building down. And that proved invaluable the next year, almost a year from the date they put them in 1988, when a fire spread because of high winds to the area, and they were able to just wet the building down really quickly and save it from devastation. So that was really lucky and good planning on the part of the park service. I love some of the fine details that Reamer, his carpenters, and artists have used in the construction of the inn. As you walk into the grand room, the registration desk is on your left, and designers of the hotel picked out a lodgepole pine tree for right in front of the desk with a big grizzly bear claw mark in it. The banister is made from hand-selected lodgepole pine. There are certain pine trees in the forest that have branches that have been damaged by heavy snow loads or by wind and are not quite straight. One of the carpenters, named Melvin Campbell, actually signed the inn down one hallway by guest rooms and dated his signature from back in 1903 in a carpenter's pencil. And I love the old payphones. There actually are old phone booths in the hallways of the Old Faithful Inn with actual phones inside them. I know for some of you older viewers, payphones were normal, but up in Yellowstone, they're a relic from the past. You can still use the payphones to make local calls or load coins into them to call long distance. But I just think that's a fun detail from the past. No historic hotel is complete without a good ghost story. There's a headless bride ghost that descends down out of the crow's nest searching for her decapitated head. She's wearing a flowing gown from back in the early 1900s. She's sometimes seen by visitors or staff coming down out of the crow's nest searching for her decapitated head. The young woman was from back east, where she had a marriage arranged for her by her father, but decided to break it off. There was a man that she was in love with instead that swept her off her feet. The father disagreed with this matchup, so he gave them their wedding gift of some money, but then disconnected her from the family and said that she couldn't have her inheritance. But the happy couple left the East Coast on their honeymoon for Yellowstone National Park and stayed at the inn. While they were there, the husband decided to gamble away her father's gift. The bride quickly called home to Dad and told him about it, crying. But the dad didn't listen. He was still angry. So later that night, the two got into an argument in their hotel room, and the husband killed the wife in the bathtub and took her head away. The next morning, after other guests complained about the turbulence in the hotel room, about the arguments in the hotel room, the park staff broke into the room and took a look and found the bride dead in her bathtub. Sounds pretty scary. But she's still there, searching for her lost head.
Thank you so much, Laura and Kirk, for sharing Old Faithful Inn with everyone. It took them a long time to put all of that footage together for us, and to find all of those cool little hidden gems within the Old Faithful Inn. That is something that I take my guests on tour quite a bit
Yeah.
to go see it, especially like the bear claw marks or the signatures on the wall. Like I think that's a really special thing to show people. And any new guides that are out there who are working for ecotours, be sure to check out that Old Faithful video for training. Awesome. Well, next we're going to move on to a much smaller animal, one of our smaller animals, teeny tiny animals that we have in the greater Yellowstone ecosystem. We don't really see them around the Old Faithful Inn, but you can find them in rock piles and at higher elevations. All right, up next we have Pika with Sarah Ernst.
Hello, this is Sarah Ernst, and I'm out on a hike in some rocky country just outside Grand Teton National Park. We are in the habitat of one of the most elusive and one of the most adorable animals in the greater Yellowstone ecosystem, the pika. So where do we go to see pikas in the greater Yellowstone ecosystem? Well, any big pile of rocks at high elevation will often do, but what's more important is that temperature. I would not look for pikas at anything over 70 degrees Fahrenheit. Have you ever been hiking in Grand Teton or Yellowstone National Park and heard something that sounded maybe like someone blowing on a party favor hidden deep in the rocks, a little eep sound? Maybe you catch a glimpse of an ashy gray animal running across the rock pile, and that would possibly be the pika. This is some excellent pika habitat right here. What makes this such good pika habitat is the pile of rocks behind me. This one happened during a landslide. You'll also see them up canyon walls and in the high country and above the tree line. Wherever there's piles of rocks, you might find pikas here at higher elevations. They need these piles of rocks to elude predators. They're pretty skilled at darting in and out of the paths they know so well. And also to store those hay piles they need to survive the winter. The average pika weighs about 5-6 ounces. That puts it at about the weight of a baseball. And they're about the size of a baseball too, maybe a softball for the bigger ones. Pikas look like a little furry rodent that you might find in a pet store, maybe a chinchilla, a guinea pig, but they're actually closely related to rabbits. They're in the lagomorph family. Other animals you might see in rock piles like these would be the golden mantle ground squirrel, the marmot, a much larger furry critter out here, and we have a couple varieties of chipmunks as well. All of those animals hibernate for the winter except for the pika. Now, when you've got a place with its winters as long as ours, 6-7 months in the high country, that can be a big problem if you are trying to live off the land and you're covered with 6 feet of snow. So pikas deal with our long, snowy winters by gathering big piles of hay, which they cure out in the sun to stash underneath the rocks to use during the winter. Pikas spend half their lives in the darkness in these rock piles under deep layers of snow, eating the hay that they had stored over the summer. That makes them one of the busiest animals here during our short snow-free months, trying to gather enough to survive. So we're starting to get a little bit worried about these beautiful but very sensitive animals. We're experiencing hotter and drier weather across the last couple of decades across the American West than we used to, and that's posing several survival threats to the pika. Hotter summer day temperatures keep pikas indoors for longer, meaning they can't be out there gathering the hay they need to survive the winter. It's also changing the type of vegetation they have access to, as we're seeing snow melt out earlier and the pattern of plants alter across the ecosystem. Across some populations, such as the Great Basin population, pikas are retreating from lower elevation areas, some by around 1,000 feet. The problem is, retreating to higher elevation areas, you eventually run out of room to go. Pikas are being monitored here in the greater Yellowstone ecosystem to see if they're doing the same thing. Interestingly enough, there are some pikas that have been able to survive at low elevation in places like Craters of the Moon National Monument, where they use cool lava tubes to escape the heat of the 100-degree days that are found out there in the summer. Multi-day tours are often when we have time to stake out these pikas and try to be able to film them and take pictures of them. They're definitely an elusive species, but boy, they're worth it. Aren't they adorable? This is Sarah Ernst with EcoTour Adventures signing off.
Oh my gosh, Sarah, thanks so much for trekking up there. It's not an easy task to go where the pikas live, right? You saw they were deep in those alpine environments, in those talus fields. So that's not a park the car, set up the scope. That's a bit of a trek. So Sarah, thanks for that awesome footage and that interp. We did want to say for viewers, if you hear a intervaled buzzing, like we mentioned, we are at the shop right now. So we actually have guides who are coming back from taking guests out, and they are cleaning the cars. We each guide responsibility is to clean the vehicle once they're done with the tour. So if you hear that in the background, that is why we are not being taken over by aliens.
Yeah, and I think it's about 6 o'clock, and so all of our Yellowstone people are coming back.
Coming back from their big day.
Yeah.
But up next, gang, okay, stay with us here. We went from Bears and Wolves, Old Faithful Inn, big, giant, historic building, down to the small Pika. Now we're scaling back up again. We're checking in with Chris, who's going to talk to us about the bison rut. So we're going from small little rabbits to big mammals now.
The biggest.
Let's check in with Chris, learn all about the bison rut.
Hi, I'm Chris Kassar, Wildlife Biologist Guide with Jackson Hole EcoTour Adventures. Coming to you live today from Antelope Flats, where we have some bison, the emblems of wilderness here in Wyoming. And today we're going to talk about some fun facts about these amazing animals and talk about the rut, also known as their mating season.
Bison are often underestimated, but they are incredible animals. Males, also known as bulls, can weigh up to 2,000 pounds, and females weigh in at almost 900 pounds. Despite their giant size, these largest land mammals in North America are extremely agile. They run 35 miles per hour, jump 6 feet high and 14 feet out, and they're also excellent swimmers. Surprising, right? Given that they look like they would sink immediately. Though bison came close to extinction in the late 1800s, today the Greater Yellowstone ecosystem has the largest remaining wild bison herd left on Earth, making Grand Teton and Yellowstone National Parks some of the best places in the world to see these amazing animals, these emblems of wilderness. This also means that these parks are the ideal place to experience the exciting annual bison rut. The rut lasts all summer, but the action really peaks in late August and early September. Deep bison bellows can be heard across the landscape. Bulls begin to court females through a variety of behaviors, like sniffing and face-to-face lip curls, or what's known as wallowing. This is when a big bull bison drops to the ground and rolls in a dusty wallow. At the same time, he's urinating, spreading his scent around for all to smell. It sounds gross, right? Well, this behavior actually serves a huge purpose. It helps other bulls identify him, how old he is, and assess his dominant status in the herd. This also helps females identify which bulls they may want to mate with. Throughout the summer, wallowing behaviors increase. Males roll violently on the ground to display aggression. This can cause so much dust to rise that the herds can disappear behind clouds of dust. Though bison are especially vocal during the rut, much of their communication is nonverbal. Watching their tails is one of the best ways to tell what they're up to. The higher a bison's tail gets, the more agitated and potentially aggressive it's becoming. Another nonverbal indication of aggression is pawing or rubbing their head on the ground. All the posturing and nonverbal communication we just talked about is an effort by bison to avoid a physical confrontation by establishing dominance. However, if one bull won't back down, these challenges can become violent. The power of two 2,000-pound animals colliding at full speed can shake the ground and can even lead to injury or death. One study found that over 50% of bull bison had evidence of previous injuries sustained in fights with other bison, such as cracked ribs or healed broken bones. Once a bull proves through face-offs that he is the strongest, he turns his focus to the females.
but females have a say also in who they'll mate with. Females select for the larger, more mature bulls, and their suitors must spend quite a bit of time tending potential mates. The ritual of the rut helps ensure the survival of the fittest, earning a bull the chance to ask for a female's acceptance as a mate. Bulls will mate with more than one female, but females will only mate with one bull. About 9 to 10 months after the rut is over, small rusty red calves are born, just as the first green grasses of spring sprout. These babies are on their feet within an hour and taking their first bites of solid food within a few days. Bison mothers are very protective of their babies, which we call red dogs, and as a result, upwards of 80% of calves survive to weaning age. No easy task when you live alongside large carnivores like grizzly bears and wolves. With the largest remaining wild bison herd left on Earth, the Greater Yellowstone ecosystem is one of the best places in the world to experience this awesome annual event. We hope you get a chance to get out and see it.
Thanks, Chris, so much for talking about bison with us. They're one of the animals that at this time of year we're seeing a lot of, and so great to see all of that action, bull bison running down the roadways with their tongues hanging out, rolling in dust wallows. It's a pretty exciting time of year to see all these bison fighting for those females. Yeah. Well, up next, we have one of my favorite parts of this broadcast, and that is our monthly trivia. Yes. Woohoo! Yeah, and so thank you everyone who participated in last month's trivia. But before we get to last month's question and this question of the month, we do have our sponsored web store item, which is a couple of books which are found up on our webpage. And I have read 2 of these books. So the first one, Wolves in Yellowstone, and then the second one, Death in Yellowstone, both great reads. Death in Yellowstone is a little morbid. And then, of course, Phantom of the North is a book about one of my favorite birds and one of the birds that we love to see on tour, which is the great gray owl, which, so cool. Oh my gosh. And it's like, have you ever seen the skeletons of them?
No.
So it's, okay. What? So this bird stands about this tall. Yeah. But it is literally all legs, like they are all fluff. And so if you ever see the skeleton of them, or if the wind's blowing their feathers, you realize that they're just all fluff. But they're one of the coolest birds that we have out here. So definitely check out those books on our web store, where you can find a bunch of different apparel and water bottles and coffee mugs and books and stuff like that. And then if you would like to support the guides who put all the videos together. These guides are out in the field on tour taking videos almost every day of the wildlife they see out there, and then we get to use those videos for our broadcast. And so we did set up a donation page. All of the money on this donation page goes to the guides and helps support them making all these, or getting all these videos for us.
Which is fun. It's fun for us in the field.
Yeah.
I equate it to like Naturalist video games, because
totally.
the scope is here, the phone is attached, but the animal is not necessarily standing still, or the bird is not in stillness. It's in flight. So it does take some talent.
And it's amazing. So I do a lot of the video editing for this broadcast, and I'm always impressed. Guides able to have a steady hand with guests looking over their shoulders at the phone as they track a wolf chasing a herd of bison across grasslands. Really, really great skill.
Yeah, it's fun. It keeps it spicy, keeps it entertaining. So it's cool if y'all decide to donate to get more footage and help us out by supporting this broadcast right here.
Totally. Well, enough of the silly advertisement for the broadcast. Next up, we have our trivia question from last month. So thank you all who participated in that. And the question was, how old is the Yellowstone volcano? And so if you don't know this, Yellowstone is not just a national park. It is one of the world's largest volcanoes. And it is one of the things that classifies it as a volcano is its calderas. It has multiple calderas within the national park, 3 that are pretty recent. And then the Snake River Valley was created by a series of eruptions over 17 million years. And so we know the volcano is at least 17 million years. There's some there's some evidence to suggest that it's up to 70 million years old. And so for this question, if you answered, we aren't sure, then that would be correct. We have some educated guesses about how old this volcano is.
Yeah.
But honestly, we don't really know for sure. It's suspected this volcano is very, very old, but we're not positive on how old this volcano is. And so thank you all so much for participating in last month's trivia question. And good luck on this month's. I think I'll turn it over to Bo to talk about this month's trivia question. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, team. So this month's trivia question is actually about one of the animals that we talked about here on the broadcast. We are talking about bison. So this month's trivia question is, how do you tell the difference between male and female bison? Is it A, males have L-shaped horns, females have C-shaped horns, B, body size, C, head size, or D, all of the above?
Awesome.
Visual example.
There you go,
to
visual
help you
example.
out.
So and then this is a bonus question in the comments. What do you
Yeah.
think this horn came from, a male bison or a female bison? So
what do you think?
So check it out. Yeah, tell us what you think in the comment section.
Yeah.
All right, thank you, Bo.
Yep.
Awesome, guys. So now we're moving on to my favorite part of the broadcast, and I'm hoping that Bo really likes it, and that's our question and answer. And so to kind of give you guys an idea of how this works, I have our iPad, which is kind of how I'm running this broadcast in front of me. And I can see all of the comments that you guys are putting on Facebook. And so feel free to comment under there any questions that you have about wildlife from really any part of the world.
Yeah.
History for Jackson Hole, Yellowstone, geology for I mean, really any sort of question you guys can think of. And I'm excited to have Bo here because we got to pick his brain a little bit. And so definitely ask some hard questions. And we, of course, accept questions from all ages. So if you have any kids with you during this broadcast, feel free to have them ask some questions. And then if you do have a question, be sure to ask that question on our official Facebook page so that we can see them. If you're watching it on like an ornithology page or something like that, you have to go to the Jackson Hole Eco Tours web or Facebook page to ask that question. All right, well, let's see what we have.
Shout out to Kelsey as well for managing some of these questions and putting some of them in our view as well. Thanks, Kelsey.
Yeah, thank you, Kelsey, so much. I'm seeing lots of great answers. Ooh.
Coming in from the trivia question of this month.
Yeah, this is awesome. All right, I'm going to scroll to the top.
Okay.
People from all over the place. Virginia.
Hey, someone from well, it could have been Jackson, Mississippi, but I'm assuming it's here.
I actually think that's Jeff, one of our guides, who's in Jackson currently. Hi, Jeff.
Hi, Jeff.
Yeah, hope you're enjoying the broadcast. All right, so we just had a comment here from Libby who talks about the paw print on that on the what do you call it, the banister,
support pole,
the support pole of the Old Faithful Inn. Yeah, that is so cool. And one thing that's really cool about that is if you walk around the pole, there's multiple claw marks on it. And so I almost wonder if maybe that was like a generational scratching pole.
Maybe it's like a scent marking.
Totally.
Maybe it's on a game trail and multiple bears are going in there and saying, I passed through, I'm gonna scratch in this.
Exactly.
A lot of times they turn around, they bite those trees like that, really get in there with all those scents. But can you imagine being one of the people on that build of saying, we're gonna use this tree, we're gonna cut this one down, and let's put that in there. That must have been kind of fun.
1903,
their perspective. Yeah, super fun. Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, Libby. Oh, Tenley says hi to everyone, and hopefully she'll be back here soon. But in the meantime, she's saying hi to everyone on the broadcast. Awesome. Hi, Don. I see that you're watching us today. Awesome. Well, here's a great question from Don, actually. Yeah. Have there ever been dinosaur fossils found in Yellowstone National Park or Grand Teton National Park? This is a great question. If you guys don't know, I'm a big big dinosaur nerd.
Surprise, surprise.
Surprise, surprise. I'm a nerd about everything. Well, sweet. So in Yellowstone National Park, there's never been dinosaur fossils found. And part of the reason for that is because Yellowstone is a volcano. And so when it erupts, it destroys everything. Fossils, gold, silver, all the minerals there. All the colors you see in the hot spring are not minerals, they're bacteria, largely because there are very few minerals in Yellowstone because of the volcano erupting. But on the northern range of Yellowstone, which is outside of the caldera, we do have some fossils. We have redwood tree fossils from the Miocene, which was about 50 million years ago, which is insane. And they were preserved by being buried by volcanic ash, maybe from the Yellowstone volcano. So who knows? Pretty cool. And then there was a plesiosaur found in Yellowstone. And if you don't know what a plesiosaur is, yeah, isn't that cool?
Never knew that. That's awesome.
And it's like very scant evidence. It's like a couple of like vertebrae.
Yeah.
So not a whole lot, but they did find a plesiosaur in Yellowstone. And a plesiosaur is a marine mammal, or not a marine reptile that lived during the age of the dinosaurs, during the Mesozoic. But great question.
Fossils in Grand Teton from an earlier age. So on some of our peaks, Mount Moran in particular, you have this 13,000 plus foot peak. You climb to the very top of it. The views are amazing. It's alpine, and you look down at your feet, and there are fossilized pieces of coral and these little bivalves, because as the Tetons kind of punched through these previous layers of sandstone and mudstone, there's fossils up on top, which seems like an unlikely place for there to be fossil hunting opportunities. But yeah, they're in Tetons as well.
And they're preserved in limestone, is that correct?
Sandstone and limestone.
Sandstone
because of that calcite.
Yeah, and so that's pretty incredible to think that the rocks on the Tetons used to be under the ocean, which is insane.
Pushed up.
And this region is really fascinating because over the millions of years, this place has been an ocean, then it was land again, then it was an ocean again. At one point it was a redwood forest. It's really interesting to see how over the millions of years, geologically and habitat-wise, this place has changed incredibly dramatically, which is pretty incredible. And then, do you know this, Bo, that most famous dinosaur fossils have been found in Wyoming and Montana?
Right, yes, I did know that one. Yep.
So, Tyrannosaurus Rex. So not in Yellowstone, but just outside of Yellowstone and Montana and South Dakota, we have Tyrannosaurus Rex.
Big digs, like finding a lot of stuff.
Yeah, exactly. In the Badlands, which is pretty cool. Triceratops, Ankylosaurus, Pachycephalosaurus, all these famous dinosaurs that I'm sure your kids are playing with back at home. But thank you, Don. Great question.
Good question.
Yeah.
Good question.
Awesome. Ooh, let's go back up.
We got some more.
Ooh, yeah, we have more questions. All right, so Jennifer, we have a question. How big are grizzly bear dens, and do they dig them? Do you want to start off with this one, Bo?
Yeah.
Great.
So these dens, the bears they'll repeat dens or they'll dig new ones. But I think for a lot of these bears, it's a little bit of a ROI, right? They're a return on investment of, maybe I'm not going to start digging a straight hole, like picture like a badger or some other animal that's going to dig straight down. Maybe there's already a tree. Maybe there's already an inlet or a cave or something. And then I'm going to start from there, dig deeper into that substrate. So that helps get you started. And then the thing I always think about with these bears, with mother bears in particular, is when they dig these dens, it's big enough for them to kind of quasi move around, change positions. And when they have those cubs, the first year, those cubs are tiny, right? Yeah. So they have lots of room. I always think about that next year of those cubs coming in and mom being like pushed up against the corner and thinking like, dang it, I had so much room last year when they were teeny tiny.
I always imagine it would be either like really uncomfortable or really nice to like have all of them like snuggling together. I'm that sounds comfy.
I
but
can see that.
If it's a super small den, then they're going to be crammed in there.
Yeah.
And then of course we had our most famous bear out here, Grizzly Bear 399, I guess 2 years ago now. She had 4 cubs. Like, how were they managing to fit in a den together?
Especially if she's repeated that den when she's had a litter of 2 or she's had a litter of 1, you know, that would change as well.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I've been reading a lot about bears denning in different environments.
Oh, yeah.
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 And so here they absolutely, and in most places they use
Yeah.
some sort of thing to like build under like roots of a tree, a rock, or they like expand a pre-existing burrow, like a badger burrow. But then I was reading about like the different like slope aspects that bears dig on. And here in Yellowstone, we find that they den mainly on south-facing slopes.
Right.
But then I was reading about in Montana, where bears are expanding out onto the grasslands of Montana, they're digging on north-facing slopes, which is fascinating. And so interesting to like think about why that would be. And my theory is that here in Yellowstone, we get a lot of snow.
That's just say snow.
And so like in the spring, they want to be like, have a clear exit, or they want to be woken up by the sun. Versus on the plains, that snow buries them and there's less snow out there. And so it might be more of like an insulating layer during like the peak of hibernation. That's not like based on evidence. That's just me theorizing. But interesting to see that.
I like the theory though.
Yeah.
That they would want more snow on that north-facing side, insulate, keep them in there a little bit more.
Exactly.
Versus like in Yellowstone, they could be feet and feet and feet.
Yeah.
Even on the south-facing sunnier slope. Ah, cool.
Yeah. And this den that I was reading about, the one on the grasslands of Montana, the actual like tunnel to like the chamber that the bears were sleeping in was 7 feet long.
Oh my God.
So it was a very deep den. So that she dug 7 feet into the ground before she made a chamber, which is where they all slept. And it was a female with 2 cubs. And then I was reading about bears north of the Brooks Range, which is in Alaska on the tundra. And they dig a den every single year. And the reason for that is because during the winter, the permafrost holds the den together. And then when it melts in the spring, it collapses.
It's like a sinkhole.
Exactly.
Whoa.
And so they have to dig it every year. And so what bear dens look like totally depends on the environment, the substrate, and the habitat that they're in. And whether or not they have topography, or if they're in the flat tundra or grasslands, or if they're up in the mountains. Pretty fascinating.
Very cool. Smart animals.
Yeah, and I don't know if you've ever seen the claws of a grizzly. Perfect for digging.
Huge. Just little shovels.
Yeah, basically.
Terrifying shovels. Yeah.
Yeah, dude, like daggers that can also work as shovels. Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, thank you, Jennifer, for that question. All right. Ooh, here's one. This is a great one from Mike. Definitely one that I'm sure people are thinking of a lot now, since we're getting some news articles out of Yellowstone talking about people approaching bison and stuff. And so the question is, what could be done to educate people that Yellowstone is not a petting zoo? Yeah, great question.
Complex for sure. Yeah, I mean, the park, leans on people, tour operators like us. It is exciting when animals are close to the road and in view. There is this certain, I don't want to be in behind that car window. I want to be there. I don't want anything between me, because I'm in this really wild, beautiful place.
Totally.
And so, we try to just, friendly reminders of, hey, gosh, dang, that bear is coming a little bit close. Let's hop in vehicles. But I wonder if there would be kind of this, I don't know, like Good Samaritan reward program, that if a park ranger sees you helping out somebody else, maybe you get a free night stay at the Old Faithful Inn. I don't know, something. But there is a big push to continue to educate people that we are visitors, that we are in their world, and even if we see things that are hard to witness. I'm thinking of like bison crossing rivers or injured animals. That's the equation out here, and sometimes it's hard to watch those and let them happen. Hard to watch sometimes.
Totally. I'm reading this book. It's called Yellowstone Has Teeth.
Ooh.
And it's about this amazing woman who lived in the interior part of Yellowstone before internet, before entertainment. They didn't really have TV in winter. And if you don't know, Yellowstone in winter is completely like isolating.
Yeah.
You don't have a lot of people there. Their only way to get there is by snowmobile. It's honestly like The Shining a little bit.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good way to put it.
But she wrote this book about how Yellowstone, there's always a very thin line between delight in seeing these animals, looking at the geothermal features, and danger. How you can step a foot too close to a bison and get charged and trampled. How leaning over the boardwalk to take a photo of a hot spring can result in you tumbling into the boiling water. And the park does do a pretty good job of telling people that Yellowstone's dangerous. Like when you go through the entry, they hand you a map and a newspaper that highlights the dangers of Yellowstone. And whenever you go to the hot spring features, whenever you're in areas that are frequented heavily by bison, there are signs: do not approach bison, do not leave the boardwalk. They even put up signs like bear in area when there's a grizzly bear sighting. Like if there's a trail, they will either close the trail or they will put up a sign that says bear recently seen in this area. And so, you know, the park can only do so much. And there's been, I mean, pretty contentious lawsuits over this. The park can put up as many signs as they want, and people are going to choose to ignore them. They put them up in many different languages so that people from other countries can read them. And we still have a problem. And part of the reason behind that is just the amount of people that are coming to Yellowstone. We have 4 million people coming every single year to Yellowstone. If 1% of them misbehave, then that's going to be a lot of people messing up in Yellowstone. And so it's probably going to be a problem that's ongoing. And it's going to it's probably going to be something that the park has to constantly manage, because people do choose to ignore the warning signs, which is unfortunate. And when they get injured or hurt, that's kind of on them, unfortunately. And the downside is that then the animal typically suffers because of
that geothermal,
or the geothermal
like
feature.
Don't throw something in there.
And so when we're in Yellowstone, we do remind people when we see them doing bad things, but sometimes they don't listen. There's only so much you can do. One thing that I would like to see in the future for Yellowstone, I think they do a good job, but one thing that I hope that they do in the future is put up maybe some signs or in the brochures and stuff, like don't like handle animals that are like injured. Like if someone like...
That has come up a lot recently.
Like we had a guy pick up a baby bison that got separated from its mother in the river. And of course, I don't want to put a whole lot of blame on him. He had good intentions, but we don't want to do that in the national park where everything's wild and natural. And so having some warning in the brochures or something about like not helping injured animals or baby animals and letting park personnel deal with that, or letting nature take its course might be a good idea.
That's a good additive for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thanks for the question, Mike. Yeah, that's a little bit of a tough one.
That's a can of worms for sure.
That's definitely a question we get on tour quite often, for sure.
But I will say I took my parents out, and we had a bear sighting, which was awesome. You know, trying to impress the parents and the in-laws, Glenn and Stephanie, if you're watching. But there was a moment of even for me, I want to show them that bear. No, we can't get out yet. We can't move just yet because it's exciting.
Totally. And like when you're in the moment and it is exciting, you have to slow down and think about like your actions. Like, is this ethical? Are we being responsible with this animal? Are we influencing its natural behavior?
That's the big one, right?
We have to remember that we're observers and we're just visitors here. Even for Bo and I, who work in the park every day, we're just visitors and we're just observing the animals. We don't want to interact with them. Yeah, that's a great point. Thanks, Bo. Thanks, Jennifer. We think you're awesome too. Thanks for tuning into our broadcast today. Thank you everyone for showing up. So I'm gonna throw this question up. This is from Tenley.
This one before,
I know. Who's Tenley? She has a question for Bo.
Favorite critter in the whole world. I go black bear.
Black bear. Oh, cool.
Actually, both Tyler and I are from Colorado. But growing up in Colorado, a lot of moments with black bears. And I think guiding here, the grizzly steals the show. It's the novel animal, right? They used to be in California, New Mexico, Kansas. They're here now. And so a lot of times people are always wanting to see the grizzly bear. And I love them as well. but sometimes seeing the black bears
Mhm.
it's just kind of this like underdog, and I have more memories with them. So I usually go black bear. And I think what I like the most about our western black bears as compared to black bears in the east is the color variation.
Totally.
And while at first it can be a little disappointing with or odd with guests on tour, we pull up and we see this brown colored bear, and they say, "Bo, Tyler, is that a grizzly?" And you're like, "No, it's not." But let me tell you why that's really fascinating.
Mhm.
And everyone's always intrigued of, oh my gosh, I'm from South Carolina, North Carolina, Tennessee. I always see these bears. They're black, 10 out of 10. So that variation, that color variation, their behavior, and that they are kind of the lesser, I'll say that in low terms, of the bears, I think I have to go black bear.
Yeah, I think black bears are pretty cool. I mean, I grew up in Colorado
Yeah.
too, and like I'd see them from my parents' porch and stuff up in the woods, and I don't know, I almost want to say they're primate-like in some ways, like when they're climbing trees, and of course they're not primates, they're wild bears, but they look kind of primate-ish sometimes. It's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I usually go black bear, and I will say probably like most wildlife guides, that answer changes.
Yeah.
You know, of like, actually right now my favorite animal is this woodpecker, or my favorite animal is this. But right now, today, Tenley, black bears. Going black bears.
I feel like my favorite tends to be what I'm not seeing, like at the moment. Like if I'm going through a couple tours and I haven't seen a grizzly for a while, then I'm like, I really want to see a grizzly.
Yeah, sure.
And I'm like fascinated. I'm reading all about grizzlies when I go home after work.
Yeah.
And then maybe I see a bear, and then I go a couple weeks or months where I don't see like bighorn sheep. Usually we see bighorn sheep in the winter. And so in the summer, I'm always like fascinated with reading about bighorn sheep.
Where are they?
Yeah.
What are they doing right now?
Exactly. Great question. Thanks, Tenley, for tuning in. Ooh. Kelsey is one of our guides. She's actually in the comment section. So hi, Kelsey. She has actually climbed Mount Moran, which is pretty insane. I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, Kelsey, but it took 18 hours. Which is insane.
There's like a little lake in front of it.
Yeah.
You gotta paddle the lake and 6 miles, I believe, and then get to the summit. And that's a big journey.
Yeah.
Kudos, Kelsey.
Ooh. Oh, Jennifer found shark teeth on a farm in Central Florida from a megalodon.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Wow. Cool.
Megalodon, biggest shark that has ever existed. So, and the teeth are like,
they're big. They're like 5 inches, right?
Yeah.
They're huge.
They're massive.
Wow.
Sweet.
Good find.
Ooh, amazing. Was it Sioux discovered in Montana? So, for those of you who are not dinosaur nerds, you might not know who Sioux is. Sioux is the largest and most complete Tyrannosaurus Rex that we have. And I believe she was found in Montana in the Hell Creek Formation. And so if you want to learn more about Sioux and the Hell Creek Formation, you can do a quick Google search. She's super famous. And then if you are ever in the region, you can go to the Museum of the Rockies. They have an incredible exhibit.
Is sweet.
It's so cool.
Yeah.
They have like, have you been there, Bo?
Yeah.
They have like an entire like growth, like fossils growth series for like T-Rex. From like tiny little like 3-foot baby T-Rex to like, how big do you think that the big like specimen is?
It's kind of impossible to think about.
Yeah, it's like 20 feet tall.
Yeah. It's that thing that if those were on the walking around, I'd never go outside. I would just never go outside.
I'm always like, grizzly bears, they're big predators, and like when you go hiking in the woods, like have bear spray, like or wherever your surroundings. Imagine if we had to go hiking with T-Rex around. That'd be crazy.
What would you do?
With Sioux walking around in Grand Teton.
Yeah, we love you, Sioux, but we're thankful that your time is done.
Exactly. Sweet. Thanks, Debbie, for tuning in today. Yeah.
Hi, Mom.
Oh, is that your mom?
That's my mom.
Oh, cool. Hello. Ooh, this is a little bit of a longer question. I'll read it out to you guys. I saw on a Nat Geo special that bears travel to a rocky mountainside to eat some sort of moth, ? to fatten up for winter, how far do they travel for those? Great question. So a couple different documentary series have featured grizzly bears in the lower 48s, mainly in Wyoming in the Greater Yellowstone ecosystem, hiking up to these what we call talus slopes, which are areas where there's big boulders and everything, to lift up the rocks and to eat moths, which is really fascinating. Yeah, and they're eating cutworm army moths. And so you are correct in hearing that it is moths. And what happens is during the early spring, these moths hatch from eggs and they feed on the rich vegetation in the lowlands. But as the summer heat increases, they pupate and they turn into their winged version. And because of that heat, they want to escape it and they fly up into the mountains. The reason the grizzly bears go after them up on those talus slopes is because they're like something like 60% fat, and bears need to, pack on the pounds for hibernation, and it's a really good source of fat. And so bears go up there and they can eat something like 20,000 moths a day by just flipping over boulders and licking them up on these slopes. Yeah. And it's really fascinating. Most of them are like outside of the boundaries of Yellowstone, and so we don't actually observe this on tour. But sometimes our bears in the middle of summer start disappearing, and I always think that they're heading up to the talus slopes to go fatten up. Yeah. One thing is interesting, black bears also do it, and the two bears, they partition the slopes when they're feeding. So grizzlies are like in the main section out in the open, and then whenever those boulder fields come down to the trees, the black bears are like on the edge of the trees. A little more
black bear, master of the forest, a little bit more.
Exactly.
Oh, that makes sense. Yeah.
There is one of our more famous bears, grizzly bear 610. When she doesn't have cubs, she always disappears. Yeah. And there's a couple of people that theorize that she actually goes and fattens up on moths when she doesn't have cubs. The reason for that is because when they have cubs, they're vulnerable to male grizzlies, and I think she stays down here to protect them. Yeah. But when she doesn't have cubs, she goes up and fattens.
She's willing to risk it.
Yeah, and as far as bears, like how far do they travel for this food source? They travel pretty far. So there's this place in Yellowstone called Grizzly Lake, and there was a bear that was radio collared at Grizzly Lake, and they tracked it through the summer, and that bear crossed Hayden Valley, crossed the Yellowstone River.
Big male?
It was a female.
Female, okay.
A female without cubs. Yeah. And she went through Pelican Valley and then up Sylvan Pass all the way to feed on these moths way up in the mountains. And that's a far distance. Like
end to end. Interesting.
How far do you think that is? Like 50 miles?
Yeah, I was going to say 50 plus miles.
Maybe 50 miles.
Yeah.
And so for these bears, it's a valuable enough food source for their survival and for winter hibernation that they would travel that far.
And really cool that they're so in tune with the natural cycles that, okay, it's getting to this time where the days are shorter, it's colder, whatever their cue is to, great, I'm going to cross this entire ecosystem to get to that resource. And it's cool to watch those bears when they're on a move like that. They're pretty darn efficient.
Totally.
They're just kind of like cruising across. I know in some of those articles I've been doing some reading that they are actually worried to put the closure areas around them because that would highlight where these things happen.
Totally.
So a little plug for if there is a bear in area sign, don't go in there searching for that bear, right? Because they have noticed that in these big talus fields, as probably they don't know, hikers have been moving through, even at a distance of, a mile and a half away, those bears can smell you, they can sense you, and then they leave that area and get away from that really, really valuable food source.
Yeah.
So even though they're traveling a long distance and they're a tough critter, that is a big deal for them.
Totally.
Yeah.
One of the things that amazes me is like us as guides, we're more attuned to like what's happening out in the park than like the average person. Yeah. But then I always imagine like what the wolves, the elk, the grizzlies, like how attuned they are to like the seasonal change, the environmental changes. Like that grizzly had to know that without looking at a calendar, without knowing what month it is. Or a map. That she had to travel 50 miles across Yellowstone at a certain time of year to go get that food source. Like, imagine being that attuned to your environment. That's really incredible.
Do you know if that bear came back to den?
I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah.
Either way,
Maybe, but
big distances.
huge distances, pretty incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah, great question.
Nice.
Awesome. And we are currently in moth season, so the bears are
Yeah.
up there feeding on moths.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I think we have time. If there's one more question, I think we actually got them all.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, yeah, thank you all so much for joining our broadcast today. And it was great seeing all the familiar faces and
Yeah.
our familiar names and listening to all your great questions and stuff. And yeah, thank you, Bo, for joining us this week. Yeah.
Super fun to be here. Yeah.
Yeah. What do you think, guys? How did he do?
You do okay?
Should we have him back?
You do okay? I might come back again. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for tuning in to our monthly broadcast. Remember, it's the first Wednesday of every single month. We have this broadcast where we highlight what we see on tour during the month. So thank you all so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next time. All right. Bye.
See ya.